Well, this is an exciting time of year for a lot of couples. Engagement season. It typically runs through till Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day marks the unofficial end of engagement season, with 40% of all engagements happening between Thanksgiving and Valentine's Day. But before tying the knot, it's important for all those newly engaged couples to talk about money and finances. So Denis Horrigan, partner and co-founder from Connecticut Wealth Management, is joining me right now. Denis, thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Erica. Thanks for having me.
All right, so where should newly engaged couples begin? How should they start planning, and as far as setting a budget? These weddings, they are just so expensive these days.
Yeah, I think one of the nice trends over the past couple of years has been actually smaller weddings because of COVID, of course. We've had smaller weddings, so people have realized that they don't have to have this huge, giant blowout of a wedding to actually celebrate their nuptials. But that being said, a lot of people do want to have a big, giant wedding. So our advice is always plan. Set a budget. Think about what's important to you. Think about what are the memories you actually want to create. Set that budget. Stick to that budget. And if you can, avoid getting into credit card debt. Here's a big warning. People probably know this, but the interest rate on credit card debt is going to go up significantly this year. So what you take on in credit card debt today, by the end of this year, the interest rate could be double, maybe even triple what it is today.
Now, what about other financial planning that couples should start thinking about and talking about?
Yeah, well, aside from planning, the other key to having a successful financial marriage is really communication. So we suggest that people spend an awful lot of time talking about goals. Before you get married, it's really good to know what the other person's viewpoint is on different things like saving and investing and debt. Mm-hmm. And how about what do they think about putting kids through college? Do they expect to pay for the whole thing? Do they expect the kids to pay for it? Mm-hmm. Have these conversations actually before you tie the knot, because finance is a big cause of divorce. So it's something that you really need to get out in front of.
I have to imagine that also includes whether you're going to have a joint checking account or separate accounts, and who's going to pay for what as far as utilities and mortgage.
Yeah, communication is the key, is to set all that stuff out ahead of time so that you don't end up getting into arguments somewhere down the road. As I mentioned, 1 in 5 divorces are actually caused by strife over finances. So the more you can get laid out and planned out before you actually get married, you're just going to increase your chances of having a happy marriage.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about a prenup? Some couples may be thinking about it. Maybe one person within the couple is thinking about it. What do they need to know?
That's so romantic, Erica. Yeah, this is the thing. Is right? I know nobody ever wants to talk about a prenup. It's a really good way to let the air out of a room. It's a real touchy subject. Yeah. What we find actually works a lot better is utilizing trusts. And here's what I mean by that. Oftentimes, parents may have some assets that they expect their kid to inherit. So if parents pass away and their daughter, let's say, inherits assets, and that daughter gets married and then gets divorced, the assets that she inherited, that ex-husband is going to take half of them. Mm-hmm. So what we actually suggest is the parents can actually establish a trust so that the daughter can inherit the assets in a trust, use the trust assets and spend them with the husband. If, unfortunately, they do get divorced, those trust assets are not part of the divorce proceeding. So mm-hmm. That's a really helpful tool that you actually don't have to have with your potential spouse ahead of getting married. But that's something that you want to talk through with an estate planning attorney. And a lot of them around here do a wonderful job with this subject.
And what should older couples who are getting married, maybe for the first time later in life or remarried, what are some things that they specifically should be keeping in mind?
Well, I'll point out 2 things that they should be thinking about. One is for those that are getting married for the first time, again, communication is key. Knowing what the other person has coming into the marriage, both in terms of assets and debt, and knowing who's going to pay for what. I think that's just absolutely critical. For those that come to a marriage, maybe it's a second marriage and they have kids from a prior marriage, there's some really good planning work that should be done here. There's a tool called the Q-tip trust. It's a qualified terminable interest property trust. Q-tip's a lot easier to say. Mm-hmm. So a Q-tip trust is a way to, let's say, husband A has kids from a prior marriage, wife B has kids from a prior marriage, A passes away, B inherits the assets in this Q-tip trust. She can use the assets, spend the assets, but when she passes away, A's assets go to A's kids. not to B's kids. So that's a good way to protect the assets. The other thing, this is probably one of the things that we see most often is oftentimes people forget to change the beneficiaries on the retirement accounts or the beneficiaries on life insurance policies or change their wills to account for the fact that their ex-wife is now an ex-wife and maybe they shouldn't be inheriting all of those assets.
A lot to keep in mind. Dennis, thanks for sorting it through with us.